Hi there. Welcome to After the Well, the conversational podcast where you'll learn to realize the everyday encounters that seem mundane have the ability to transform your very existence. My name is Melissa Lappin, and I am so glad that you've chosen to join me and my friends as we chat about how we hear God in our everyday lives, because we're everyday people. We might laugh a little, we might cry some, but know that you're going to go away encouraged by the stories that we share. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Welcome to After the Well.
I guess we're live.
We are. Cheers.
Clink 'em, baby. Let's go.
Welcome to this episode of After the Well. And today I am talking to my good buddy, Stephen Hardwick. And I love him. He has become, I don't know, he's just become an integral part of me being me. We talk like two girlfriends in a hair salon sometimes, and I love it because we can be real, and sometimes you just need somebody, especially like of the opposite sex, where you can connect. We kind of try to isolate ourselves, and I just got all my girlfriends, but we need perspective of all people, and I love Stephen's perspective in my life. I'm going to let Stephen introduce himself because he's got like a resume that's like, it'll scroll down and across my room if I read all of his awesomeness. So, Stephen, who are you and what you about?
That's a good question. I've been trying to figure that out for a very long time.
30 whole years. Okay.
30 whole years now. I'm still asking that question. Maybe one day we'll find out. No, I currently where I'm at, this is how we really met contextually, was through the church that I'm on staff with, which is Resurgent ATL. I'm technically the associate worship pastor, but also in charge of prayer and ministry teams on the worship department, obviously, and then now a youth pastor, which is a very fresh and new and challenging thing that I never would have expected to do ever. Never had youth ministry on my radar until last year. But yeah, I've been a part of the prayer and worship movement for probably 10 years plus in total now, with different organizations. Like the Burn 24/7 was my biggest one, where I was in leadership with. I started out serving and volunteering locally here in Atlanta. And, one thing led to another. We started hosting burns, which are extended hours of worship and prayer and intercession. It could go 4, 6, 8, 10, 24 hours, 48 hours, however long you can facilitate. That's how long you can go. But we started hosting those at our local church probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I'll share a little bit about my story with the burn later when we get into that. But we started hosting, and then I got a little bit more involved in leadership at the local level. One thing led to another. Then I was planning a burn over in Augusta. And then I felt the Lord call me back to Atlanta and to really put roots down with the local church. So then I took over the burn Atlanta as the primary director. And then not long after that, became the regional director for the Southeast region for the burn 24/7. And did that for around a year and a half, 2 years, which is when you and Scott were with me in that journey a lot here locally. And I processed a lot of this with you guys too, that I felt the Lord was not just calling me back to the local church in a full-time ministry context, but also calling the house of prayer back into the local church, that he was marrying the two in a sense, which is kind of my role now, and kind of my personal mission within the context of the local church is to help give an understanding to the body that we are the prayer room, that there is no separation between local church ministry and the house of prayer. Jesus intended, I talked about this yesterday, Matthew 21, that his house be a house of prayer. And so that's now my personal mission, and probably will be for the rest of my life, that I will make sure that by the end of my day, that we will create a community of people that know not just how to host the presence of God, but how to create a culture of prayer and become a people of prayer, which is what I talked about last night at Young Adults a little bit. But before that, I've been in ministry probably my entire life. I started leading worship when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, playing guitar, singing in a youth group. And right out of high school, just started doing itinerant stuff and traveling, and went from playing guitar to leading worship to now being a local church pastor, worship pastor.
Right. So circling back around to your view on worship, this is the part that I wanted to catch. When did that change for you? Because, okay, so AfterTheWell, the whole thing is we just want to have conversations around our encounters with Jesus. And when we hear a word and we grab a hold of that, and we can go on to the next thing, because we know that we heard a word in our hearts for that. And, which is what the woman at the well, she had her encounter, and then she just like, okay, later, Jesus, we're doing that, and she just went back to her town and became an evangelist, because she knew that she had met with heaven by that well. So I love this story. I've heard it a couple times, and I love it. Tell me about that for you. Tell others about that for you. What was your well moment with the Lord? Walk us through that encounter or that season.
Yeah. It was probably, even up till this day, the most supernaturally charged season of my life. And I think to help drive me and give me purpose and get me fired up for what God was trying to put in me and create in me. But a lot of it has to do with my journey of how I came into the burn, which I'd never had on my radar at all. I think that in my early 20s, 20, 21 years old, I think my end goal was to just become a local church worship pastor, maybe even eventually a church pastor, and be very content with that. And I think I could have done that. I could have even been mildly successful and been content inwardly. And then I had a spiritual father at the time with the church that I was on staff at down in Newton. And he reached out to me one day. He just sent me a text message with a link to this, 2-week worship school thing up in Pennsylvania. And he said, I really think that you're supposed to do this. And usually I listen to that kind of stuff, but, I was like, I just burn out on conference culture and, school ministry culture. I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. I don't really feel like I'm even interested in it. So I took it to the Lord and I prayed about it. And I actually felt like, I was like, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this thing. And, it had a pretty substantial cost. It was like a $2,000 2-week thing where I had to pay for a flight and obviously school costs and just a lot of things that supernaturally all came together. I think out of my own pocket, I never paid very much at all, maybe a couple meals on the way and on the way back. It just kind of took care of it. Money showed up out of nowhere. People that I hadn't talked to in 10 years were like, hey, I'll give you $150. Like, it's fine. Yeah, I'll pay for your flight. I'll put it on my credit card. I'm like, what?
Gifts and surprises, checks in the mail.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd never really experienced that kind of thing, that supernatural giving either. If that was the first time in my life that I personally, you grew up in a Pentecostal charismatic culture, that happens a lot. You see it. But when you encounter it for yourself, it's like, oh my God, this is insane. So just fast forward a little bit, I go on this trip, and just a little context for where 20-ish-year-old Stephen was at the time. I had just maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 years before that, discovered what the prophetic culture really was. Like I grew up in a charismatic culture where, the gifts were flowing. There were, we had evangelists coming through, and people were getting healed every now and then. But never, words of knowledge and prophetic ministry, laying hands on people and seeing them deliver, all this kind of stuff that we casually, almost naturally experience now. I was very new to. And the thing that my pastor at the time was very intent on teaching on, especially with me in discipleship, was prophetic ministry. And so I'm very fresh in it. I'm very fired up. I think maybe just a couple weeks before, I had given, and this was when Sean Bowles' ministry was starting to blow up on the internet. And so I'm watching Sean get birthdays and very detailed words. And I'm like, I'm going for that. I don't know why, but I want that for me. Like, I just, not even to look cool. I just want to hear God that way. And on a Wednesday night at church, I get a birthday out of nowhere. And it was at the end, like he's closing the service and it's like 8:30 at night, people are ready to go home. And I'm like, hey, I think I have something and I'm very terrified to do it. I get an accurate birthday and a word of knowledge as soon as I get the birthday. And so in me, like I feel like I'm invincible. You know, when you get that kind of stuff, when you start to hear God in a way that you've never heard before, it gives you this sense of not just boldness, but security in who you are. Like that, I'd never experienced that level of sonship before. And so I get on the plane to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to this worship school. And I'm praying the whole time. I'm like, God, if you got me here and you did all this stuff and you're speaking the way that you are, surely this has to be the most supernatural thing that I'll ever experience. And sure enough, we start to land, and I have the sense that God's going to do something when I land. I'm like, okay, antennas up, let's go. I get off the plane, and I've never really, I've traveled a little bit, but never on my own. And so I get, off the plane. I'm walking around, have no idea where to go. I have no idea what to do. I know I'm supposed to meet somebody to pick me up, and that's about it. And I'm like, okay, Holy Spirit, I don't know where to go. Where do I go? And Melissa, I kid you not, out of the bathroom on the right-hand side of my face, an angel walks out of the bathroom. And I've never seen angels at this point. And so I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it.
So what length of time, is this over like a week, a month, like when from your prophetic word, your word of knowledge and the date?
This is about 2 weeks in between.
Okay.
So me getting this incredibly accurate word of knowledge was about 2 weeks before I get on the plane to leave. So,
okay,
just right quick.
Okay.
Like I had no time to really process it very much with my pastor or anybody.
Right.
I didn't even really have any follow-up ministry after that to go like, well, let's just do it more. You know what I mean? Like I was
and that's a good point too, with when, especially, which is why sadly we have so many flaky spiritual people, is because there's not the culture around to help steward them, because like you're in the airport and you see an angel and it's like, can somebody help me?
Oh yeah.
Like,
It was one of those encounters too, where it was obviously an angel. And it wasn't like I saw a ball of light. Like I saw like an 8-foot tall dude in armor. And I'm like, he's either cosplaying or I'm seeing into another realm. Like I'm seeing an actual angel. And I knew in my spirit, like this is an angel. Like this is an angel the Lord sent to help me.
But so
like, again, I just had that sense.
That's the first time that had happened to you.
Ever. And I'm 22, I think at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And everything after that, and I felt heat all over my body. I'm getting emotional, and I'm like, I just walking through the airport. I don't know what I'm doing. It was like I was in a dream, and I'm just following this angel that all the way down to the baggage, and I'm like, oh, thank God, because I sure never would have found that on my own. And sure enough, he just kind of vanishes towards the escalator down to baggage, and I look down at baggage, and the dude that's supposed to come pick me up's down there looking at me, waving at me, just standing there like a goofball.
That's
I'm like,
cool.
No way, this is insane. So that's how I knew. Coming into it, I knew something was going to happen. Didn't really have an expectation of how crazy it was going to get. But that encounter kind of set the standard of the next 2 weeks for me. Everything in those 2 weeks was still to this day, I think, one of the most profound encounters I have ever had.
Yeah, you just got leveled up. God just kind of primed you were at the well at home and he threw you a date, and then he threw you the word, and then you had 2 weeks to work on that. And then you have another encounter where he throws you an angel to lead you to the airport so you don't get lost.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Just setting you up. I love that about God. That we think that all of our encounters with the kingdom, you know, having conversations with the Lord, seeing angels, healings, all of our things, we kind of have this false expectation that they have to be like spectacular and these big, flashy things. When a lot of times, most of the time, any prophetic, any story that I've heard, any testimony that I've heard, just like you're by yourself. Woman at the well was by herself. You know, she walked that 2 miles to that well by herself. You know,
Totally.
And Jesus meets us in those places, and I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think that, again, through false teaching, that, or not even false teaching, but a false expectation that it has to be a conference or church on Sunday or, you know, some big thing, you know, I'm going to go to this conference because the Lord's going to meet me there. You were going your way and he met you twice before you got there, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
A lot of that has to do with, I think church culture been so geared to encounters and experiences primarily. That's very driven on, you know, the 4-wall encounter. And, you know, I love the local church. I still do. I'm a major advocate for it today, but to a degree, we become so dependent on the space that we create for people that in a way we've become dependent on it. A lot of church cultures have. I won't say us, because I definitely am not. I'm more prone to have an encounter right here in this living room with the Lord than I am in the local church some days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways on that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead and finish. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, I'll keep going down the line because this whole day was so just full of stuff that I don't even know where to start or end. Yeah. So we get Liam, the guy, picks me up from the airport. We all get in a van together with like 5 or 6 other people maybe, and we're like, hey, we're hungry. Everyone's tired. Been on the plane and been a long day. So we go to a Moe's just to get a burrito and like settle a little bit. I get a word of knowledge for one of the students that's with us about his life, and it is incredibly accurate. It just blows his life up. We lead him through like almost a sozo deliverance period. I also, this is another thing that I've been through, is that our house was very geared towards sozo. It was Bethel Sozo Ministry is what we were training and doing that at least twice a year. And so I'm, certified twice in sozo and also in Shabar. And so I'm just excited to use tools.
It's no wonder I like you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've done all the stuff. It's like we had Donna Da Silva and Teresa Leipscher over at our church at one point to host like a weekend conference thing. That's how I actually met Chris and Terry.
Okay.
Fun fact was through that.
Cool.
And
so for those listening who don't know, like Sozo Ministry, it's just kind of inner healing. There are people, we do like a person who wants the sozo, and then like 2 people that sit and kind of just facilitate an encounter with heaven. And because sometimes we just can't see the forest for the trees in our own lives, and we just keep knocking our head against a wall. And so that's what when we talk about, because I'm sure I'll mention it in other podcasts down the road and stuff like that, because it's helpful. It's just helping you facilitate exchange lies. What lie am I believing? What is God saying about this? What is Jesus saying about this? And then what's the exchange in that? And so going into this, Stephen's just saying he's had a lot of, supernatural experience and church experience, which actually I'll plug in here. The woman at the well did too, because she challenged Jesus with, we worship here, you worship there, and all those things. So she was an educated woman. And sometimes that can be, especially in our church, being educated in church things can be such a hindrance. That's a whole nother chit chat we can do. But anyway, so there's a little bit of information. If we kind of throw around some words that you're not familiar with, just to clarify a little bit of what sozo is, and it's just inner healing. It's just
Totally. Yeah, the word sozo is mentioned over 100 times in the Bible. In the Greek translation, it actually means saved, healed, delivered, depending on the context.
All at once.
All at once.
All at once. Yeah. It's the words that Jesus used. All at once. Yeah, I'm certified in it too. So yeah. So anyway, so continue.
Yeah. I could share an hour's worth of testimonies from that one day. But yeah, I mean, basically, revival breaks out at a Moe's. We lead this student to an encounter with the Lord, gets massive breakthrough with family trauma. We prayed for, I think, a homeless guy outside, and one of the students led him to the Lord. We get in the van and we leave, and we go to the house that we're staying at. And I mean, we had maybe 30, 40 students that got there a little early. And this was a school of like 100. I think we had 112 students that week. Which is crazy because we were all staying in the same house, which, that sounds just about as stressful as you would imagine.
Oh my God. So in that, did you know anybody?
I knew nobody. Yeah. I had no prior connections coming into the school. And I was both very excited and also very terrified because I think a part of me was very reliant, dependent at the time on knowing someone to feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was in an incubator in a small church of less than 100 people on most days, and I knew all of them. And that was my entire life. Like, I grew up in a small town of, 30, 40,000 people, and I knew everybody. And so I'd never had this kind of experience where I'm way out of state. I don't have anybody with me. I'm not related to anybody in this town. I'm not submitted to anybody spiritually here. Like, my pastor ain't here. Nobody's here. I got nobody to lean on, basically.
And how old were you again?
I was very early 20s, 21, 22, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that kind of kicked off those 2 weeks for me that, we were sitting around a table praying together. We even played a game of, like, you get a word for the person across from you at the table. And just, it was an hour and a half of that kind of stuff. Once we walk in the door and this is what we start with. And so we're already
know it all when you show up.
Yeah. And it's funny because we had some students that weren't familiar with that. And so it was almost an introduction and a teaching moment for them too, of here's a crash course on the prophetic 101. Here's how to, hear God for yourself.
Right.
And so that was equally as awesome. That was just as cool to me as leading the homeless guy to the Lord outside the Moe's, was that we're giving people the tools to be able to access God's voice for themselves. That's just as incredible as somebody getting family trauma working off to me. But yeah, that entire first day was crazy. We spent that day kind of debriefing and meeting with our leaders at the time, and we spent some time in worship at the house that day. Those next 2 days were actually, that whole first week was very challenging for me. After that, I think after the high of seeing an angel and having an angelic encounter and all this other stuff going on, I did not realize that the Lord would immediately begin to expose a lot of the orphan tendencies in me so that he could do a deeper work in me, which was, I think, the end goal of the whole entire trip, was to, get me into a greater place of sonship so that he could begin to do a deeper work of really releasing destiny into me, which was what I think this whole trip was about, was getting me out of this just going to be a worship pastor mentality. I've got something greater for you if you'll just get rid of, your own ideas about yourself. And the 2 weeks of school, just for context, was worship 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And then when I say worship, it's usually either a stripped acoustic set or a full band, which was mostly full band. And it was awesome. I mean, still to this day, some of the most incredible encounters with the Lord I've had in worship ever. But I think it was the first day after we got there, the second day after we got there, early morning. I don't know any of the leaders. I don't know their history. I don't know what organizations they're with. They could be nobody. They could be world famous. I have no clue. worship starts, they invite everybody down front. It's theater style, so it's like the seats are high up and there's a dip and then there's a stage. And so I'm sitting all the way in the back, and then I go all the way to the front of the stage for worship. And I'm standing there, I'm getting wrecked. Worship's awesome. God is so thick in the room. And I feel a leader walk up behind me. And he lays his hands on me, and he begins to prophesy some of the most accurate information about my life that anybody has ever prophesied over me. I mean, he was calling out prophetic words verbatim that my spiritual fathers had prayed over me in the past year to 18 months, that my pastors have prayed over me, that they've spoken over me and said, I really feel like this is who you are and what you're called to do. And I'm like, I don't think so. And this man that doesn't know me from anybody, casually walks up behind me in worship, and it's like, for 10 minutes. I mean, this isn't just like a drive-by word. This is like he's got his hands on me, and he's just reading my life. And I'm a hot mess because he's calling out the psalmist in me. He's calling out the leader in me. Was praying things like, you are a David in the most literal sense, and that you've been hidden for a long time, and it's been intentional, and it's been a time where you've learned to access God's presence. Now he's about to raise you up in a kingly and a priestly way and set you up as a leader and a king for a movement that he wants to do in you.
So let's hit this for a second.
Yeah.
For your opinion, why? Because you said that he had, verbatim, said some words that other people have said. So did you believe or have a reaction or encounter when those other people said it? Or was it
no.
Or is it like, oh, well, this is family, this is my path, this is whatever. And do you think it's because of the familiarity of the person that gives the word originally, but then when a stranger does it, you're just like,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was a really weird time, because I think it taught me a lot of the value of discipleship from the people closest to me. And a lot of it, I think, was really just being honest here, not having a lot of trust in the leaders in my life. And it really began to reveal how mistrusting I was of people. But the good thing was that right before this trip, God was really speaking to me in a way that he'd never had before. And so I had a very high level of trust in God's voice.
Mm-hmm.
From not just from my inner self, but from other people too. And I think that this was the encounter that really started to break a lot of that off for me, so that I could begin to really listen and trust the leaders in my life, because they were there for a reason.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what you said last night. And you hit on it a few minutes ago about the mentality, and you talked last night about, God working on our mind so that he can get to our heart,
Yeah.
And that's
God will often reveal or send our mind to reveal our heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but that's for another podcast. So it's good.
Yeah, that's another one. Episode 3, episode 4,
right.
Whatever. Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, Stephen will not be on here just this one time.
Oh no, definitely not. But yeah, that whole encounter, and just for context, this dude actually was not a nobody. He was one of the early founding members of Burn 24/7 with Sean Foley.
Okay.
His name's David Fritch. He's I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but he will occasionally, every few years or so, I'll get a random 3 or 4 minute voice memo from him, a text message. And it's just like, hey, I was just thinking, driving down the road, driving to somewhere, and just have this word for your life. And, it'll be dead on for where I'm at.
That's awesome.
To me in 3 years.
I love that so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it's stuff like that, even continually now today, that is just little snippets that help even more build a foundation of trust in the Lord. It's not just the people, it's not just the Melissas and the Scotts, it's not just the Chris and Terry Olivers, it's not just the Cody and the people closest to me, mm-hmm. that I can trust, that God can speak and will speak through anybody, just to kind of pierce that uh, I don't even know what this, what the, I don't want to call it.
Our tribe, I hate that word. I hate it. It's almost so exclusive. Well, this is my tribe. And we almost put a wall up where we can't receive from other people. And it's such a hindrance. And also the thing too, like, going outside our quote denominations or, even political party, dare I say it. And thinking that because someone doesn't think exactly like I do, they're not really hearing from God, Oh,
totally. And I can't tell you that weekend too. I mean, that was such a diverse group to where, I mean, we had people from Baptist backgrounds. We had people from Methodist backgrounds, non-denominational, charismatic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It was so wild that all these people came together. Nobody was mad at each other because of how different they were. They were open to receiving words from each other. It just insane. And it taught me a lot, the value of not getting locked in to the stream that I'm a part of.
Right.
That I was very much so okay with at the time.
Yeah. And we do. We get comfortable.
And in some ways I still am, and I'm still working that out. And I work very hard intentionally on being vulnerable in that, and that I'm not always right. The people group that I'm with is not always right. They don't have all the solutions that it takes all of us together. It's what John Limber used to say, that's one river, many streams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some value to that just because we are in a movement that's comfortable and okay and pursuing the fullness of the manifestation of heaven, that they have a lesser Holy Spirit.
Yeah. That's good. But we just get caught up in our denominational mindset, and we judge and we box people in and write people off, and and we really hurt ourselves because we can't have all the perspectives and all the stuff that, just the different aspects of God, because we all see God differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see in part, we hear in part.
Yeah.
In some ways, it really does take all of us to function, which is scary to think. It takes the First Baptist and the United Methodists, and
absolutely
we don't like to talk about that, but that they are as much of the body of Christ as Resurgent Atlanta is.
Yep. Yeah. I had a girlfriend once, and it was just pretty cool. We were just talking about all the things, but she was preaching one night to the kids. I did my third year ministry school in Cameroon, West Africa, and one night at school with the students there, she was preaching, and she was just talking, and she's like, how dare I judge someone else's perspective of God? And that's what we do. It's like, well, how can they think, and it's just crazy. The hindrance that we have. Anyway, let's shoot
Rabbit
that
trail.
let's shoot that squirrel.
Yeah, you tell me where you want to go, because I mean, I could sit here for 3 hours and share stories, unless you want me to hit a bigger point or something. I don't really know.
Yeah, no. I like your story about your encounter. What was your, looking back on that 2 weeks? What was your big well moment? Was it when that man laid hands on you? Was it revelation after that? What was kind of in that one moment, which was a 2-week moment? What really hit home, and what are maybe a couple points that they're hills you're willing to die on today? They've become core values for you. Because I think that's a lot of the encounter like that, when we encounter the Lord and we have that moment where he tells us all about ourselves, and we get to challenge him and have that conversation, and he just becomes more real and more real and more real, those things become core values in us, I believe. And those are mountains we're willing to die on, and we are not going to compromise on those things. And, they're tattoo worthy, and they're just permanent. They are part of who I am right now. So yeah. I know that there were a couple moments like that for you. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, there were two distinct ones. One obviously was that encounter with David that, he was laying hands on me and reading my mail and calling out the things in my life and more that I just refused because, one, of trust issues with leaders, and also because it made me uncomfortable that I was actually called to more than just church ministry, mundane church, every day, leading worship on Sundays ministry. And I think that particular moment marked me and set me on a path to really give myself to what God was doing regionally and even nationally to a degree in regards to the worship and prayer movement, which was very foreign to me. I'd done worship for a long time and I'd been in prayer meetings forever. Since I was a baby. But I'd never been a part of a global movement I'd never had an awareness that God was doing anything bigger than Baxley, Georgia, if I'm being honest. I didn't even know if he was doing anything there either.
Right.
Baxley's my hometown, just for context. I'm from a small town, South Georgia, where nobody usually knows unless, you've passed through a couple times. That one, very early on in that 2-week period, started to peel back the layers of my heart that maybe I did have a desire and a capacity for not just being a part of a movement, but being a leader in it. That was the overarching word that David gave, is that you're called to be a leader in this. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know. I just don't know. And sure enough, the 2 years that followed that, was just the most ridiculous upgrades of leadership in my life. I went from being just a very underpaid church worship pastor to being a regional leader sometimes at a national level as well for a global worship and prayer organization with a burn. It just happened so fast. It just didn't make sense how fast it escalated with them not really knowing me and not having a resume and an experience in it. They were just like, yeah, you want to lead the region? We believe in you. Do whatever you want to with it. It's fine. I'm like, what? Who does that? Nobody does that. You want my resume? Like, there's nothing on it, but you can have it. But that was one that the one foundational moment in a ministry context that set me on the path to where I am today. So that was the one that helps define ministry, Stephen. The one that happened the week after that was a little bit of a harder one. So 100 and some odd students, they broke us up into smaller groups to have sort of, more intimate discipleship time.
Right.
And my two leaders, Tannen and Christina Herman, were the ones that actually owned and ran the house. I think they ran it as a nonprofit at the time. So, a pretty big mansion in the middle of downtown ghetto, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Very, very interesting spot. They've done a lot of really good, interesting work there with cleaning up the city and very cool stuff. So they were my leaders for our small group, which was maybe 10, 15-ish students, something like that. And for the second week, they were like, hey, we want to, have lunch with everyone at one point in the week. So let's set up a time, like I think it was maybe a Tuesday or something. Now let's just go outside and have lunch together and talk and see how you're doing and all this kind of stuff. And I remember we got lunch and I was a little bit nervous because they were very intense and I looked up to them as leaders. They're very cool. They're both prophetic and very good worship leaders and musicians. I'm like, oh my God, they're amazing. So they set me down, very intense. And Tannen goes, this is the first thing he says to me. He says, Stephen, we really love you and we like you a lot. But we don't really feel like we've seen the real you yet. I said, oh, that's weird. That's very interesting to say to me because I don't know what that means. And to be honest, we've never really worked that out in that week, which was just as troubling to me as the initial statement that we don't really think that you're being yourself. I'm like, I don't really know how to do that, to be honest.
Plastic apple.
like, oh, yeah, plastic apples, man. Like, I don't know what that means. No one had ever, really talked to me about that before. And it took me several months to really digest this and also try to unpack it a little bit. But I was so on fire to advance God's kingdom and to do the ministry stuff and get into prophetic words that there was so much of an orphan in me that God wanted to work out, that this was the initial thing that it started to break a lot of stuff open in me. I mean, I remember flying back, sitting on a plane. I was very sick on the way back then. This was pre-pandemic, so nobody really cared that I had 103 fever on the plane with a sinus infection. I thought I was going to pass out because my ear was so clogged. It was very rough. It was probably the worst flight I've ever been on. But I'm sitting on the plane. I'm sick. I'm like, this trip was really good. Why do I feel like crap right now? Like, why do I feel like, in some sense, that I'm a failure or I failed? And it started this work in me. I kept hearing this thing on repeat from Tannen, like, we don't really feel like you're being yourself. I don't really feel like we've seen the real you yet. I'm like, oh man, that really sucks to hear. And so I just started taking this to the Lord of like, God, I don't really understand what that means. What do you mean they haven't really seen? Am I hiding myself? And sure enough, I mean, over the next weeks and months, he started to reveal that a lot of who I am, I was putting on a facade for people to protect my heart and also just to protect my own comforts of, I'm leading worship on Sunday mornings, just being very, very vulnerable here with everyone, leading worship on Sunday mornings and then going home and basically doing nothing, for 3 or 4 days. Just go home and watch TV and not really doing much else, not really praying, not doing any ministry at home, not worshiping the Lord alone at home or anything. Just flip my switch, and then Friday rolls around. Well, I guess I should make a set list for Sunday and send that out. And
wow.
Sunday morning, get up and drive down and lead worship. And I'm on fire again. Let's go. And I just didn't recognize the pattern that I created in my own life. And God was like, this is what they mean. That you've compartmentalized a lot of yourself to make it easy and comfortable. And it's like, it's time to get rid of that. It's time to fully turn the switch on and leave it on.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. In a mentor class that I'm taking now, the leader, the mentor, he was talking a couple classes ago, and it really made an impact because he was just talking about the church in general. And, we as faith-based people, especially in the charismatic world, where gifts and talents are highly sought after and used. And, we like the energy of it, the healing gift, and all this. Can they pray? Can they do all these things? And he was just talking that sadly, most people do life on their gifts and talents and not an anointing or a calling.
Oh, 100%. And that's where I had been my entire life.
Yeah, and we don't, especially in our stream, we don't, and I'm not saying everybody's fake or whatever. We have our moments, and, and to the best of our ability, we're genuine, we're really trying, we're really doing the thing. But for the most part, like you, especially, I would say especially, but I think worship leaders deal with it a lot because there is, I guess, a performance aspect to worship and playing music, because you have to have a sound, you have to have a look, people gotta want to be around you, you can't be crappy and expect to have, a following or, and if you're a musician, you can't be a crappy musician and expect to get gigs, so there is a level of entertainment and, that kind of thing, but they're being so talented and I can't play anything, but,
I wish I could. I played saxophone in high school. There's a fun fact. Or no, middle school. And I was really good at it too. I played alto, and then I got busted in the mouth with a baseball bat and cracked my teeth, and I couldn't play anymore. So there's that. But running on, and it's obvious because there's so much burnout. People right now deconstructing their faith. I don't know what I believe, and God's not real. Yeah. And it's because they were just trying to survive on raw talent. Yeah. So I am personally thankful that you got the message.
Yeah, me too. It completely transformed it. It's the foundation for who I am. I mean, you and I both know I'm very vulnerable and very open and honest.
Yeah.
That encounter was kind of the one that set me on this path of being a very open and honest and vulnerable person. Because I think that was my root issue was just being afraid of being open to people. I had this, outward facade of being an incredible musician, very talented, been a musician for a long time, being a very anointed worship leader that people really respected and liked about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I let that in some ways become my identity and the way that I presented myself to people. It's so funny too, but the first week going into that first weekend, worship that morning was awesome. And ministry, I think, just naturally broke out in the room where people were praying for one another. I mean, people were falling out, all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't religious at all or weird. It felt very natural. God was just doing something in power in the room.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are leaders. I mean, there's probably 10, 15 leaders in there that are designated to do ministry. And here I go, just, let me go lay hands on somebody. And so instead of, just receiving what God's trying to do in the room, I'm walking around laying hands on people and prophesying. And don't get me wrong, it was good and it was probably accurate in some ways, the Lord.
Right.
But one of the leaders walks up to me that I didn't really like a whole lot. Let me just add some context.
Isn't that just like God?
Our personalities clashed, man.
Yeah.
It was ugly, and I was so mad at God for this too. But I knew it was the Lord, so I shut up about it. And he comes up to me and he says, "Hey." He does it in a very nice way, but it just, his personality rubbed me wrong. He walks up to me and says, "Hey, love what you're doing. You're incredible. I really want you to stop." I'm not kidding. He said, we're here to do the ministry. You're here to receive. And I mean, just very plainly, exhibits boundaries on me. And it's like, hey, I know you're anointed. Don't do it anymore. You're not here to do this. We're here to do the ministry. You're here to receive. And, it's very respectful. I was like, okay, all right, I hear you. So I just go sit in the corner in the room.
You pouted, didn't you?
I was so angry. But it was a perfect precursor for me to have, just a few days later at the beginning of the next week to have this conversation with Tannen and Christina where they're like, hey, we don't really feel like we've seen the real you. Mm-hmm. And I started putting pieces together of, man, dang, I've made what I can do my most valuable asset, not who I actually am my most valuable asset.
Yeah.
Which was what God was trying to not just do in me, but reveal in me, that he'd actually made me a specific way so that it would attract certain people to me. And that way I could have a relational influence with people, not based on my gifting or talent or anointing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so good. I mean, it goes back to, just not being authentic and going on our talent and people never seeing, just not being transparent, not being humble. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you are enough in the music world that how arrogant musicians can be.
I know. I was that arrogant musician for a long time.
I won't go say that, but
I'll say it. It's fine. Yeah, been there, done that.
Because it's the raw talent. You look at it in some of the professional athletes that we have. I mean, that they just, so what? You got an Olympic medal. You can die tomorrow and nobody will remember who you are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
people get Olympic medals every Olympics. It's not that
for the last
happens all the time.
100 years or whatever, however long we've done the Olympics.
Yeah.
But I think you know what, I don't know, for me, that's kind of the point, and we'll kind of land the plane here with just the beautiful, it was just beautiful the way you said, you know, how you relied on your talent. Say it again. It's in my head, but.
Oh, I don't know. It's gone. I'll try to
talent and not. You said what I said, but the way you said it was better.
I'm sorry. I'm really
no. You're
remembering what I said. I think in a lot of ways I'd become dependent and reliant on what I could do.
Yes, that was it.
Gifting, anointing, rather than who God was trying to reveal in me.
Right. What you can do, not who you are.
He was trying to reveal the character of God in me rather than the talent that he put in me. Both are from him. That's not a mistake. That they're both a gift from God. But the primary thing he's trying to teach me is that that's not the place that that's not your identity. Your identity is who I've made you to be on the inside. That's what they're trying to get you to see.
Yeah.
You just can't quite see yet that it's not what you can do. It's who I've made you to be. That's what is going to draw people to you.
And you play, you know, you're a musician. You play guitar, you play keys, and you sing.
Yeah.
If you lose your hands, who are you?
True. Yeah.
You know, you couldn't talk. I mean, you could probably do some instrumental stuff and you could still get by, you know, but like when we put so much value, especially in our Western culture, and in the church too, but just our Western culture in general of just all the doing versus, you know, if I couldn't do this anymore, you know, what would I do? Who am I? Because we just get so wrapped up in all of that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So second landing, we've circled the airport once.
We're running out of fuel, I think, so we might need to get this thing down quick.
We're going to call in the jet and we're going to get an in-air refueling.
Heck yeah.
So what would be some advice? What, you know, because your encounter, your well moment, you have obviously, because I've seen it, I've had conversations with you. I pretty much do life with you. And just how I've seen you grow and mature, and you are diligent to steward that revelation that you got. Versus, I heard something from God and I'm going to make it happen. Completely different mindset, completely different heart positioning toward the Lord. Because I've seen you the last 2 years and we've had the conversation, you know, about you stewarding what it looks like to be the go-to guy for prayer and ministry now at our church. You know, like, I'm a best. Oh my God, I got to speak next Sunday, you know, and you know, and I love that because for me, it shows true humility that like you really learned the lesson, you know. I'm dying here.
No, please don't.
So what encouragement can you pass on in that from your experience, you know, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'll do some rambling encouragement. Number one, first and foremost, it's okay to be a hot mess.
Amen. Thank you, Lord.
I think that the one thing that gives me comfort every day that my incapacity at the time to really submit to what God was trying to do did not limit what He would eventually do.
Wow.
That which is the story of my life, and the testimony
right
of my God. That's a word. Let's just all stand. Ministry team, come up front. We're going to close. Like that's my life message.
Land the plane. We're done.
That's it. But that's the whole thing. That's honestly, if I can be honest here, more than any profound testimony of prayer ministry or intercession or worship about my life, I think that is the the primary message up until this point of my life is that I don't have to have it all together. Like, I'm not perfect. Lord, I'm preaching Sunday at church. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know what I'm talking about all the way yet.
Yeah.
I don't have it all together. I don't. And
but
no
see,
matter
the
if you're,
beauty of that is that it leaves room for Holy Spirit.
yeah, and that, I think that's the thing too, is that it recognizing that early on gave me the capacity to kind of give myself a break
Yeah.
and not wear it as shame, but let God use that.
That's good.
And that was, I think, a saving grace for me in my early 20s that helped me to build character and integrity in God rather than get lost in the guilt of it. Of, oh, God, I just don't have it all together.
It's good.
Thanks to Jesus and the cross and the resurrection, I don't have to.
Yeah.
And that really saved my life in a lot of ways and set me up to succeed in building character in Christ Jesus. So, number one, you don't have to have it all together. You just have to be okay with God doing things that you're maybe not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that is also the story of my life, especially the past 2 years, because none of really what I'm doing now is what I really intentionally set out to do. And it's probably the most beautiful season of ministry that I've ever been in. The most fruitful, the most profound, the most supernatural. I'm going to share a little bit Sunday about some stuff that happened last week that was just like breadcrumb after breadcrumb after breadcrumb of literally the most incredible things happening.
But also, too, doing what you do, you're very public.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think, again, that does put a different perspective on being that shiny, polished apple, that perfection. There's no blemishes. There's no whatever. And so for you, just to walk in transparency with yourself, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that opens you up to be able to receive more from the Lord because you know there is more and you know you need more. You know, but then there's the other extreme of people like, oh, I'm a dirtbag. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I can't do anything, you know, and we don't do that either, you know, and so there's a balance in that. But I think the Lord, that was just a really good lesson for you.
Yeah.
You talk about my early 20s like you're an old man.
I feel like the past 10 years have been like a 40-year season. Just honestly, that's
good because you did it in 10 years and not 40 years.
Yeah, and that's a whole. No, I mean, I could talk about that for hours and hours about the how much has been packed into the past decade of my life, and you know, not just event wise, not the number of things, but the amount of character growth and the amount of encounters that I've had with the Lord, the amount of upgrades in leadership. I mean, just that so many things have happened so fast. I mean, we talk about in this stream, you know, accelerations of seasons. I mean, I feel, we joke all the time. I mean, I act like an old man. I go to bed at like 8 o'clock because I'm like, I'm tired. I get up in the morning. Physically in some ways, yeah. But I think spiritually, I've aged a lot because of, I think, my willingness just to serve the season that I'm in. Yeah, it's just been, I've been so stubborn and just serving the Lord in whatever season I'm in. And just the yieldedness and the willingness to say yes, no matter what it is. I said yes to being a youth pastor, and my God, it's been the most rewarding season. Yeah. More than prayer ministry, more than the burn, more than any church that I've ever served in a worship capacity, more than anything I've ever done. It's been the most rewarding season. I think purely because of my yieldedness and my immediate yes to it. And really just not being complaining about it, but just saying, well, it's what God called me to do, so I'm going to do it joyfully and with expectation. Well, let's just go with it. If God called me to it, he's obviously in it. And so if I mess up in it, well, he's here. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Well, that's why I got a podcast now, because I'm like, okay, guess we're doing this for this season. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Awesome. So I think we are going to close with
Okay.
that. Thank you so much, Stephen, for taking time out to do this for
You're
me.
welcome. You're so welcome.
I love hanging out with you. I love hearing your stories. I love the chit chat and the banter that we have, and how it almost doesn't matter what it is. It always gets pulled back around to what God's doing in our life.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that.
I'm fortunate for your friendship. I think there are people like you and Scott and Josh that was there last night. Just Cody in a lot of ways too. I mean, they're people that I'm so grateful for friendships that just pull out what God's already put in me that I just have yet to discover. I think that's what a lot of these conversations are. It's just finding out, oh, that's been in me all along. Thank you for pulling it out of me. And that you and I have that friendship. I'm grateful for that.
I do. Yeah, because you came to me the other day, like, so how's that podcast coming? And I'm like, well, let's see.
Oh, man.
All right. Yay.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of After the Well. We hope you really liked it. We would love to hear your feedback. Give us some likes, some reviews, some love. Share it with your friends. All the links and information are in the comments or in the show notes of the episode that you're currently listening to. Thanks, and we look forward to hanging out with you again.